On the Middle Eastern stage, violence erupts like incessant storms. Bombs rip to the skies, sirens pierce the air, and families rush to shelters, while the prospect of peace seems a distant dream. This war, which insists on having no end, has roots far deeper than newspaper headlines suggest. Its history dates back millennia to a man and a divine promise that would shape the destiny of humanity, Abraham. God instructed Abraham, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you." Genesis 12 verses 1 to 2. However, this promise of blessing would also foreshadow a profound division, whose reverberations echo in every explosion and current conflict. What truly happened between Abraham's children for their descendants to wage such fierce battles to this day? The answer begins at the beginning. The promise of a son and a great nation to Abraham was clear. However, as time passed and his wife Sarah remained barren, doubt gave way to impatience. In the anguish of waiting, Sarah tried to expedite the divine plan, offering her Egyptian servant, Hagar, to Abraham. From this union, Ishmael was born. This hasty decision, driven by anxiety, was not God's definitive answer, but the beginning of a profound division. Unbeknownst to them, Abraham and Sarah planted the seeds of a rivalry that would span millennia. That seemingly innocent act, motivated by understandable impatience, would define the destiny of entire nations, pitting brothers against each other to this very day. However, the true child of the promise was yet to come. Ishmael, whose name means God hears, grew up under his father's watchful eyes, but also in the shadow of a promise that wasn't his. When Hagar fled from Sarah into the desert, the angel of the Lord declared concerning Ishmael, "He will be like a wild donkey among men. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers." Genesis 16 verse 12. This prophecy foretold a life marked by conflict and resistance. Against all human logic, God fulfilled his promise. Abraham, at 100 years old, and Sarah at 90, conceived Isaac, the long-awaited son and promised heir. Isaac's birth brought joy, but it also planted the seeds of even greater tension. God was explicit with Abraham. "Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you are to call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him." Genesis 17 verse 19. Abraham's household was divided. Isaac, the son of promise, and Ishmael, the firstborn, silently battling feelings of exclusion. This latent tension would soon explode in a decisive episode. One day, Sarah observed Ishmael mocking Isaac. What seemed like child's play triggered a fierce reaction. Sarah demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. With a heavy heart, Abraham sent them into the desert. God intervened, reinforcing his plan. "Do not be distressed about the boy and your servant. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." Genesis 21 verse 12. That farewell marked the beginning of a permanent division. Two brothers separated not only by physical distance, but by different spiritual destinies and promises. Ishmael survived in the desert, protected by God, but distant from the central covenant. Isaac remained a legitimate heir of the divine promise. The paths of countless generations were sealed. After the painful separation, the two brothers went their separate ways. From Isaac came Jacob, who would be renamed Israel, giving rise to the 12 tribes and the Jewish people. On the other hand, Ishmael prospered, becoming the father of 12 princes, and his people multiplied, forming various Arab nations that occupied vast territories around Israel. God's promise also accompanied Ishmael, making him great and powerful, but the spiritual covenant remained with Isaac's descendants. This seemingly small difference became monumental over the centuries. Israel and the nations descended from Ishmael grew side by side, but never united. Rivalries, land disputes, and religious conflicts deepened a spiritual, political, and cultural abyss. Thousands of years later, the seeds planted in that tense separation still yield bitter fruit, reflected in the wars and tensions that dominate headlines. For many, the conflict between Israel and its neighbors are merely issues of borders or politics. However, the truth is deeper. This is not just a clash between nations, but a continuation of a spiritual drama that began with two brothers, sons of the same father, but separated by an eternal promise. Psalm 83, written centuries ago, anticipated the scenario. They conspire with one accord. Against your people they plot together and say, "Come, let us wipe them out as a nation. Let the name of Israel be remembered no more." This hostility is not new. Its root lies not just in politics or geography, but in a battle for spiritual identity and the legitimacy of inheritance. Ishmael's descendants carry an ancient pain, a feeling of rejection that is transformed into resistance. Isaac's descendants, in turn, fight to remain in the land God gave them, upholding a promise made by him. This is why, even with peace treaties and negotiations, the tension persists. This war was never just human. At the heart of all the conflicts lies a land small in size, yet immeasurable in significance: the Promised Land. The Lord swore to Abraham and his descendants that he would give them this land as an everlasting inheritance. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. Genesis 13, verse 15. This promise was renewed to Isaac, then to Jacob, and spanned generations until it reached the nation of Israel. But for the descendants of Ishmael, who also multiplied and occupied vast neighboring regions, this inheritance seemed like injustice. How could a single nation claim exclusivity over such a disputed territory? Over time, the Promised Land became the central point of tension. Jerusalem, the holy city, became desired by peoples and empires. Ishmael's descendants, spread across various nations around, saw Isaac's people as a threat, a living reminder of the promise that wasn't theirs. The territorial issue, so prevalent in modern news, is actually just a surface. What's at stake is to whom the promise belongs, and therefore, who has the right to legitimately exist in that land. Every stone of Jerusalem, every border of Israel, every disputed city carries the weight of a covenant made by God with a single descendant. And as long as this covenant exists, the conflict won't be resolved by diplomacy. At the heart of all the conflicts lies a land small in size, yet immeasurable in significance: the Promised Land. The Lord swore to Abraham and his descendants that he would give them this land as an everlasting inheritance. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. Genesis 13, verse 15. This promise was renewed to Isaac, then to Jacob, and spanned generations until it reached the nation of Israel. But for the descendants of Ishmael, who also multiplied and occupied vast neighboring regions, this inheritance seemed like an injustice. How could a single nation claim exclusivity over such a disputed territory? Over time, the Promised Land became the central point of tension. Jerusalem, the holy city, became desired by peoples and empires. Ishmael's descendants, spread across various nations around, saw Isaac's people as a threat, a living reminder of the promise that wasn't theirs. The territorial issue, so prevalent in modern news, is actually just a surface. What's at stake is to whom the promise belongs, and therefore who has a right to legitimately exist in that land. Every stone of Jerusalem, every border of Israel, every disputed city carries the weight of a covenant made by God with single descendant. And as long as this covenant exists, the conflict won't be
Resoluções
resolved by
internacionais.
diplomacy.
Atenção
Ever since
persiste.
Israel emerged as a nation, its history has been forged in a crucible of battles and resistance, not
Babilônios.
solely against armies,
Séculos depois,
but against the
Roma.
very spirit of rejection born in the desert when Ishmael was separated from Isaac. The Bible records a succession of enemies who sought to destroy God's chosen people. Centuries later, Rome demolished the temple and scattered the Jews across the globe. Yet Israel was reborn as a nation in 1948, defying all odds. Since then, an unending series of attacks and conflicts has characterized its existence. Why such strong resistance to the existence of such a small country? Because the conflict has never been merely geopolitical. It's spiritual and rooted in something the United Nations can't resolve, for it was written in Genesis. The descendants of Isaac carry the sealed promise, and the descendants of Ishmael carry a struggle for recognition. But there's a destiny prepared for both, and it's yet to be fulfilled. Despite all the pain and division, the Bible points to a future time when the conflict between these brothers will end, not through political treaties, but through something far greater, the reign of the Prince of Peace. Israel's prophets announced this day. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Isaiah 2 verse 4. There will come a time when the children of Ishmael and the children of Isaac will no longer fight. Instead, they will go up to Jerusalem together to worship the true God. The tears that have drenched deserts and valleys will be wiped away by the one who can reconcile the irreconcilable, the Messiah. He will bring justice, truth, and genuine peace, a peace that doesn't depend on borders, but on transformed hearts. Ultimately, God didn't reject Ishmael. He simply placed him outside the primary covenant. But the plan of redemption is for all peoples, including the descendants of the desert. The war between the brothers won't last forever. The promise will be fulfilled with reconciliation, and on that day, every sword will be laid down. God doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't write half-finished stories. Even when paths diverge, the divine plan remains active, silently working toward an eternal purpose. The covenant made with Abraham wasn't just for one ethnicity or a specific border. It was a starting point to reach all the families of the earth. In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed, Genesis 12 verse 3. Centuries later, the Apostle Paul will reveal the mystery. If you are Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to promise, Galatians 3 verse 29. This declaration changes everything. What once separated Jews and Arabs, Israelites and Ishmaelites, was overcome on the cross. Jesus, the promised descendant, came to unite, redeem, and restore what sin had divided. Those who once fought for territory can now inherit heaven. Those born of the desert can now drink from the water of life. Those who lived in hostility can now extend their hands for peace. The war between the brothers may have begun in Genesis, but reconciliation was announced in Christ. And in the end, there will be one flock, one shepherd, one people. The promise was greater than we imagined. The story of Ishmael and Isaac isn't just a lesson from the past. It's a mirror of the present and a window to the future. The story of Ishmael and Isaac isn't just a lesson from the past. It's a mirror of the present and a window to the future. Today, as nations arm themselves and sirens blare in Israel, many ask, why so much war? Why so much resistance? Why Israel? The answer lies at the origin. On the day two brothers were separated, on the day a promise was sealed with covenant, and another was sent into the desert. But the God who called Abraham hasn't lost control of history. He still reigns, he still speaks, he still fulfills what he promised. He's preparing the return of the true heir, the Son who will bring reconciliation among peoples, justice among nations, and peace upon the earth. And the Lord will be king over the whole earth. On that day there will be one Lord, and his name the only name, Zechariah 14 verse 9. The war between the brothers will be ended by the Father's hand, and the desert will cease to be a land of conflict to become a ground of worship. The end of pain will be the beginning of glory, and when that day comes, every tongue will confess and every knee will bow. May the true descendant of Abraham, Jesus, the Messiah, reign over all. If you're interested in this journey through history and prophecy, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters and can deepen your understanding of the mysteries that shape our world.